In a small, sleepy town surrounded by gentle hills and lush greenery, life unfolded at a leisurely pace. The streets were lined with quaint cottages, their gardens bursting with colorful flowers, and the air carried the faint scent of freshly baked bread from the local bakery. It was a place where everyone knew each other's names, where time seemed to stretch endlessly, and where the biggest event of the week was often the arrival of new books at the library. Among the residents was Eleanor Harper, an elderly woman, in her late 70s who had lived in the town for as long as anyone could remember. With her silver hair tied neatly in a bun and her warm smile, Eleanor was beloved by all. She spent her days tending to her garden, reading books, or volunteering at the community library, where she helped children discover the magic of storytelling. Despite her age, Eleanor radiated a quiet energy that made people feel comfortable and at ease around her. On one particularly sunny afternoon, Eleanor decided to visit the nearby community center. The center was a hub of activity, hosting workshops, art classes, and educational sessions for the townsfolk. That day, there was supposed to be a poetry reading session, an event Eleanor looked forward to attending. Poetry had always been her secret love, a source of comfort during both joyful and challenging times. As she walked down the cobblestone path clutching her favorite shawl, she couldn't help but hum a soft tune under her breath. When Eleanor arrived at the community center, she noticed a sign posted on the door. It read, "Advanced Mathematics Workshop, Room 3. Confused, she tilted her head slightly. Surely this wasn't the room for the poetry session. She glanced around, hoping to find someone who could clarify, but the hallway was empty. Deciding, it must be a mistake, she pushed open the door to peek inside. The room was filled with people seated in rows, their eyes fixed on a whiteboard at the front. Standing beside the board was a young man wearing glasses and a crisp shirt, his expression confident and commanding. This was Mr. Adrian Caldwell, a math teacher known for his sharp mind and slightly arrogant demeanor. He was in the middle of explaining a complex equation when Eleanor entered, her presence barely noticeable amidst the hushed murmurs of the audience. Adrian paused mid-sentence, noticing the interruption. His gaze landed on Eleanor, standing awkwardly, near the doorway. A sly smile spread across his face as he took in her appearance. The shawl, the gardening gloves still tucked into her pocket, and the look of uncertainty in her kind eyes. To him, she appeared out of place, almost comically so, in a room full of eager students scribbling notes and trying to keep up with his rapid-fire explanations. "Well, well," Adrian said, his voice dripping with mock enthusiasm. "We have a special guest today. Welcome, ma'am. Please don't let us stop you. Come on in." He gestured dramatically toward the front of the room, drawing a few chuckles from the crowd. Some attendees exchanged amused glances while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the tension building in the air. Eleanor hesitated, feeling a mix of embarrassment and confusion. She hadn't meant to intrude, let alone become the center of attention. But before she could explain herself, Adrian continued, his tone turning playful yet condescending. "Tell me, do you enjoy mathematics, or are you here for a different reason entirely?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Eleanor swallowed hard, unsure of how to respond. She opened her mouth to apologize and leave, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was the flicker of curiosity in Adrian's eyes, or maybe it was the memories stirred by the sight of the equation on the board. Whatever it was, she found herself stepping closer instead of retreating. Adrian, seizing the moment, grabbed a marker and handed it to her with exaggerated flourish. "Why don't you give this a try?" he suggested, pointing to the whiteboard behind him. On it was written a daunting equation, sprawling across the surface in layers of symbols and numbers. It looked like a puzzle designed to stump even the brightest minds. "This is a problem I've been working on with my advanced students," Adrian explained, his tone now tinged with smugness. "It's not easy, but perhaps you'll surprise us all." The room erupted into nervous laughter, though a few people shot disapproving looks at Adrian, sensing that his behavior bordered on disrespectful. Eleanor stood frozen, gripping the marker tightly. Her heart raced as she stared at the equation, its complexity overwhelming. Memories flooded back, memories of classrooms, textbooks, and late-night study sessions. For a brief moment, she felt transported to another time, another version of herself. Back then, she had been fearless, diving headfirst into problems that others deemed unsolvable, but that was decades ago, before life pulled her in different directions, before she set aside her dreams to focus on family and responsibilities. Still, as she gazed at the equation, something stirred within her. It was faint at first, like the distant echo of a forgotten melody, but it grew stronger with each passing second. The numbers and symbols began to make sense, aligning themselves in patterns only she could see. Slowly, hesitantly, she raised the marker to the board. The room fell silent, every eye fixed on Eleanor. Adrian crossed his arms, leaning casually against the podium, his smirk widening. He fully expected her to falter, to hand the marker back and admit defeat. But what happened next would change everything. For Eleanor, for Adrian, and for everyone in that room. As Eleanor began to write, the atmosphere shifted. What started as tentative strokes soon turned into confident calculations. Each step she took revealed not just her understanding of the problem, but also her mastery over it. The once daunting equation unraveled piece by piece, transformed by her elegant solutions. And as the final answer emerged, clear and undeniable, the room erupted into gasps of astonishment. For Eleanor, it was more than just solving a math problem. It was reclaiming a part of herself she thought she'd lost forever, a spark of brilliance that refused to dim, no matter how many years had passed. Eleanor stood at the whiteboard, her hand trembling slightly as she held the marker. The equation loomed large in front of her, a tangled web of numbers and symbols that seemed to mock anyone daring enough to attempt it. Adrian leaned casually against the podium, his arms crossed and a smug smile playing on his lips. He had expected this moment to be over quickly, just another opportunity to prove how superior he was compared to those who didn't share his expertise. But something about Eleanor's demeanor stopped him from dismissing her outright. The room was eerily quiet now, the earlier murmurs replaced by a collective curiosity. Some attendees watched with mild interest, while others leaned forward in their seats, intrigued by what might happen next. A few couldn't help but exchange skeptical glances, whispering under their breath about whether the old woman would even know where to begin. After all, she didn't look like someone who belonged in a room full of advanced mathematics enthusiasts. Her gardening gloves were still tucked into her pocket, and her shawl hung loosely around her shoulders, giving her an air of simplicity that clashed sharply with the complexity of the task before her. Adrian cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Take your time," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "We're all very curious to see what you'll do." His words carried a subtle challenge, one meant to provoke rather than encourage. He wanted to see her stumble, to watch. The moment when she realized she was out of her depth. What he didn't expect was the flicker of determination that suddenly appeared in Eleanor's eyes. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. The equation on the board wasn't just a problem, it was a doorway to memories she hadn't visited in years. As a young woman, Eleanor had been fascinated by mathematics. She remembered sitting in university lecture halls, scribbling notes furiously as professors introduced her to the beauty of calculus and algebra. She recalled late nights spent poring over textbooks, her mind racing with possibilities as she solved problems no one else in her class could crack. Those days felt like a lifetime ago, buried beneath decades of raising children, tending gardens, and living a life defined more by practicality than passion. But now, standing here, Eleanor felt something stir within her, a spark of recognition, a whisper of familiarity. The equation wasn't just intimidating, it was inviting. It beckoned her to step back into a world she had once loved deeply. Slowly, hesitantly, she began to write. At first, her movements were cautious, almost hesitant. She started with small steps, breaking down the equation into smaller parts. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like random scribbles, but to anyone familiar with mathematics, it was clear she knew exactly what she was doing. Each stroke of the marker revealed not just her understanding of the problem but also her methodical approach. She worked systematically, simplifying each component before moving on to the next. As she progressed, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The initial skepticism gave way to astonishment. People sat up straighter in their chairs, their eyes widening as they followed her calculations. Even Adrian, who had been so confident just moments ago, found himself leaning forward, his smirk fading into a look of disbelief. He had seen brilliant students tackle difficult equations, but never had he witnessed someone unravel them with such effortless precision. Eleanor's method was unique. Instead of following the conventional path taught in textbooks, she employed shortcuts and insights that seemed almost intuitive. Where others might have struggled with lengthy derivations, she found elegant solutions that cut through the complexity, like a knife slicing through butter. Her handwriting was neat and deliberate, every symbol perfectly placed. It was as if she were weaving a tapestry, pulling threads together until the entire picture became clear. The audience was spellbound. They whispered among themselves, marveling at what they were witnessing. "How is she doing this?" one man muttered to his neighbor. "I've never seen anything like it," came the reply. Others simply stared, too awestruck to speak. For many, it was a humbling experience, a reminder that intelligence and talent could manifest in unexpected ways. Adrian, meanwhile, was struggling to process what was happening. His confidence wavered with each passing second. He had intended to embarrass Eleanor, to use her as an example of someone unequipped to handle advanced mathematics. Instead, she was proving to be far more capable than anyone in the room, including himself. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had underestimated her, and worse, he had done so because of her age and appearance, assuming she couldn't possibly possess the skills needed to solve such a challenging problem. Despite his growing unease, Adrian couldn't tear his eyes away from the board. Every move Eleanor made was a revelation, a masterclass in mathematical thinking. She wasn't just solving the equation. She was teaching everyone present how to see it differently. By the time she reached the final steps, the tension in the room was palpable. No one dared to breathe as she wrote the last line, her hand steady and sure. When she finally stepped back, placing the marker on the ledge of the whiteboard, the room erupted into applause. It started softly at first, a few claps echoing through the space, but soon it grew louder, filling the room with a thunderous ovation. People rose to their feet, cheering for the woman whose brilliance had left them speechless. Even those who had doubted her at the beginning were now applauding enthusiastically, their respect evident in every clap. Eleanor, however, remained humble. She glanced at the board, then at the crowd, her cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and embarrassment. She hadn't done this to impress anyone. She had simply followed the logic of the problem, allowing her instincts to guide her. Yet she couldn't deny the sense of satisfaction that washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, as though a part of her soul had awakened after a long slumber. Adrian, still reeling from the turn of events, approached her cautiously. Gone was the arrogance that had characterized his earlier behavior. In its place was a mixture of admiration and shame. "That was incredible," he admitted, his voice tinged with awe. "I've never seen anyone solve it like that." Eleanor smiled gently, her expression kind but firm. "Mathematics isn't about age or appearances," she said softly. "It's about seeing patterns, finding connections, and trusting your instincts. Sometimes we forget how much we already know." Her words lingered in the air, resonating with everyone in the room. For Adrian, they served as both a lesson and a wake-up call. He realized that his assumptions about people, about their abilities and limitations, had blinded him to the truth. Here was a woman who had proven herself not just as a mathematician, but as someone wise beyond measure. And in that moment, he understood that there was still so much he had to learn. Not just about math, but about humility, empathy, and the boundless potential of the human mind. The applause in the room was deafening, a wave of admiration and disbelief that seemed to lift Eleanor off her feet. She stood there, slightly overwhelmed by the sudden attention, her cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and modesty. The equation, on the board, once an intimidating maze of numbers and symbols, now appeared elegant and resolved, its solution neatly written in her precise handwriting. It was as if she had untangled a knot that no one else dared to touch. Adrian stood nearby, his earlier confidence replaced by genuine astonishment. He had entered the room that day expecting to showcase his own brilliance, perhaps even intimidate a few attendees into recognizing his intellectual superiority. But now he found himself humbled, not just by Eleanor's skill but by her quiet grace under pressure. For someone who had spent years honing his craft, watching a woman solve such a complex problem with ease felt like a wake-up call. His arrogance had blinded him to the possibility that genius could come in unexpected forms. As the clapping subsided, Adrian stepped forward, clearing his throat nervously. "That was, remarkable," he said, his voice sincere but tinged with regret. "I don't think I've ever seen anyone approach it quite like that. Could you explain how you did it?" Eleanor hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to share more of herself after being put on the spot so unexpectedly. But then she noticed the curiosity in the faces around her, not just from Adrian, but from everyone in the room. These were people, eager to learn, not judge. Slowly she nodded and turned back toward the board. "Well," she began, her voice calm and steady. "It starts with breaking things down into smaller pieces." She pointed to the first part of the equation. "This section here might look complicated, but if you focus on what each component represents, it becomes easier to manage." Her explanation was simple yet profound, stripping away layers of complexity until the audience could see the underlying logic. She continued, step by step, unraveling the process she had used to arrive at the solution. What struck everyone most was her ability to make connections between seemingly unrelated parts of the equation. Where others saw chaos, Eleanor saw harmony, a symphony of patterns waiting to be understood. As she spoke, her passion for mathematics became evident. Her eyes lit up, and her gestures grew animated as though she were sharing a secret only she had discovered. Adrian listened intently, scribbling notes furiously in his notebook. He had always prided himself on his teaching methods, but Eleanor's approach was unlike anything he'd encountered before. It wasn't just about solving problems, it was about seeing them differently. She didn't rely on rigid formulas or memorized techniques. Instead, she trusted her instincts, allowing her mind to wander freely until the answer revealed itself. By the time Eleanor finished explaining, the room was silent again. But this time, it was a silence filled with awe. People exchanged glances, nodding slowly as they absorbed her words. Some whispered among themselves, marveling at the depth of her insight. Others simply stared at the board, trying to commit her method to memory. One young man raised his hand timidly. "How did you learn to do that?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder. "I mean, where does someone even start with something like this?" Eleanor smiled warmly, sensing the sincerity behind the question. "It's not about starting somewhere special," she replied. "It's about staying curious. When I was younger, I loved puzzles. Crosswords, riddles, anything that made me think. Math was just another kind of puzzle, except the answers weren't always obvious. Over time, I learned to trust my instincts and let my mind explore." Her response sparked a flurry of questions from the audience. They wanted to know everything. Where had she studied? Who had taught her? Had she always been good at math? Eleanor answered patiently, her tone gentle and reflective. She told them about her days as a student, when she would spend hours in the library poring over textbooks. She spoke of professors who encouraged her and classmates who challenged her to push beyond her limits. But she also admitted that life hadn't always allowed her to pursue her passion fully. "When I got older," she explained, "other responsibilities took priority. Family, work, everyday life. They all demanded my attention, so I set aside math for a while. But I never forgot it. Even when I wasn't actively practicing, I still thought about it. Numbers have a way of staying with you like old friends. Her honesty resonated deeply with those listening. Many could relate to the sacrifices she described, the dreams deferred, the talents left unexplored. Yet despite the years she had spent away from formal study, her abilities remained sharp. It was a testament to the power of passion and perseverance, qualities that transcended age and circumstance. Adrian, meanwhile, couldn't shake the feeling that he had underestimated Eleanor, and perhaps many others like her. His earlier behavior weighed heavily on him, and he knew he needed to make amends. After the session ended, he approached her once more, this time with genuine humility. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice soft but earnest. "I judged you unfairly, and—" "I'm sorry for that. You've shown me today that intelligence isn't defined by age or appearance. I hope you'll forgive me." Eleanor regarded him kindly, her expression forgiving. "We all make mistakes," she said. "What matters is what we do after realizing them. If you're willing to learn, then there's no harm done." Her words touched Adrian deeply. In that moment, he realized that Eleanor wasn't just a mathematician. She was a teacher in the truest sense. She had shared not only her knowledge but also her wisdom, reminding everyone present, including himself, that growth comes from embracing humility and curiosity. Inspired by her example, Adrian decided to take action. Before leaving the community center, he invited Eleanor to collaborate with him on future workshops. "Your perspective is invaluable," he told her. "I want to help you share it with more people. Together, we can inspire others to see math the way you do." To his surprise, Eleanor agreed. She had spent decades keeping her love for mathematics private, but now she saw an opportunity to reignite that passion, not just for herself, but for others. And so, their partnership began, marking the start of a journey that would change both their lives forever. For Eleanor, it was a chance to rediscover a part of herself she had long buried. For Adrian, it was a lesson in humility and the boundless potential of the human spirit. Together they proved that brilliance knows no bounds, and that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest moments of connection. The days following the workshop at the community center were transformative for Eleanor. Word of her incredible performance spread quickly through the small town, and soon people began approaching her with questions, admiration, and even invitations to speak. At first, Eleanor was hesitant. She had lived a quiet life, content in her routine of gardening, reading, and volunteering. The sudden attention felt overwhelming, like stepping into a spotlight she hadn't asked for. But as more people expressed their curiosity about her past and her passion for mathematics, Eleanor realized that perhaps this was an opportunity, a chance to share something she loved deeply and inspire others along the way. Adrian played a pivotal role in encouraging her. After their initial collaboration during the workshop, he continued to reach out, eager to learn from her unique perspective. Together, they organized additional sessions at the community center, inviting not just advanced students, but also beginners, who might be intimidated by math. Eleanor's teaching style was unlike anything Adrian had ever seen. She approached every problem as if it were a story waiting to unfold, weaving real-life examples into abstract concepts to make them relatable. Whether she was explaining fractions using slices of pie or demonstrating geometry through the patterns of flower petals in her garden, Eleanor made math accessible and engaging for everyone. One evening, after a particularly lively session, Adrian turned to Eleanor with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "your methods are extraordinary. Have you ever considered writing them down, sharing them with a wider audience?" Eleanor chuckled softly, brushing off the idea. "Oh, I don't think anyone would care to read about my old notes," she replied modestly. "Besides, I'm just an ordinary person." Adrian shook his head firmly. "That's where you're wrong. You have a gift not just for solving problems but for teaching. People need to hear your voice, see your perspective. Trust me, there's a world beyond this town that would benefit from what you have to offer." His words lingered in Eleanor's mind long after their conversation ended. That night, as she sat in her cozy living room surrounded by stacks of books and faded notebooks, she found herself reflecting on her younger years. She remembered the thrill of discovering new mathematical concepts, the late-night study sessions fueled by cups of tea, and the pride she felt when her professors praised her work. Somewhere along the way, she had tucked those memories away, focusing instead on building a family and contributing to her community. Now, decades later, she wondered, had she let go of too much? Could she still make a difference? The next morning, Eleanor dug out an old box from the back of her closet. Inside were notebooks filled with equations, sketches, and handwritten notes, remnants of her academic pursuits from years ago. As she flipped through the pages, she felt a surge of nostalgia mixed with excitement. These weren't just scribbles. They were pieces of her journey, fragments of a passion she had once cherished. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to dream again. With Adrian's encouragement, Eleanor began organizing her thoughts into a cohesive format. It wasn't easy. Decades of disuse meant her handwriting was less precise than it used to be, and some of her notes required clarification. But she persevered, driven by a newfound sense of purpose. Adrian helped her navigate modern tools, showing her how to use digital platforms to share her work with a broader audience. He also introduced her to colleagues in academia who were fascinated by her unconventional methods and eager to collaborate. As Eleanor's confidence grew, so did her influence. Local schools invited her to give talks to students, many of whom struggled to connect with traditional teaching methods. To her delight, she discovered that children responded enthusiastically to her approach. They loved hearing her stories about how math connected to everyday life, from calculating the perfect recipe for cookies to understanding the symmetry of snowflakes. Parents thanked her for reigniting their kids' interest in learning, while teachers marveled at her ability to simplify complex ideas. Her impact extended beyond education. News of Eleanor's unexpected rise to prominence reached local media outlets, which published articles about the mathematician next door, whose brilliance had been hiding in plain sight. Interviews followed, each one revealing more about her life and philosophy. When asked why she thought people found her story so inspiring, Eleanor smiled and said simply, "Maybe it's because we often underestimate ourselves. We think our best days are behind us, but they don't have to be. There's always room to grow, to learn, and to share." Her humility resonated deeply with readers, sparking conversations about ageism, hidden talents, and the importance of lifelong learning. Letters poured in from strangers across the country, thanking Eleanor for reminding them that it's never too late to pursue their passions. Some shared their own stories of rediscovering hobbies or skills they had abandoned years earlier. Others expressed gratitude for her example, vowing to challenge societal expectations and embrace their potential. Despite the growing recognition, Eleanor remained grounded. She continued tending to her garden, baking pies for neighbors, and volunteering at the library. However, she also embraced her new role as a mentor and advocate for mathematics. She traveled to nearby towns to lead workshops, participated in panel discussions, and even recorded video lessons for online platforms. Each experience brought her joy, not because of the accolades, but because of the connections she forged with others. Adrian, too, underwent a transformation. Working alongside Eleanor taught him invaluable lessons about empathy, patience, and the art of teaching. He learned to listen more closely to his students, recognizing that everyone has a unique way of understanding the world. Under Eleanor's guidance, he became a better educator, and more importantly, a better person. Their partnership blossomed into a deep friendship built on mutual respect and admiration. Adrian often joked that Eleanor was the wisest mathematician he'd ever met, while Eleanor teased him about his over-enthusiastic energy. Yet beneath the light-hearted banter lay a profound bond, one rooted in shared values and a commitment to making a difference. By the end of the year, Eleanor's name had become synonymous with resilience and inspiration. She received invitations to speak at conferences, contribute to educational journals, and even return to academia. While she politely declined some offers, preferring to stay close to her community, she accepted others, knowing they aligned with her mission to promote accessible and inclusive education. Her journey proved that brilliance isn't confined to classrooms or laboratories. It can emerge anywhere at any time, as long as someone is willing to nurture it. For Eleanor, this chapter of her life was more than just a rediscovery of her love for mathematics. It was a reminder that every individual has something valuable to offer, regardless of age or background. And as she stood before audiences, sharing her insights and experiences, she knew she was planting seeds of possibility, seeds that would grow into futures full of promise and potential. As the months turned into years, Eleanor's influence continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the boundaries of her small town. What had started as a chance encounter at a community center workshop had blossomed into a movement, a celebration of curiosity, resilience, and the boundless potential of the human mind. People from all walks of life were drawn to Eleanor's story, not just because of her mathematical genius, but because of the quiet strength and humility she embodied. She became a beacon of hope for those who felt overlooked or underestimated, proving that it's never too late to shine. Her partnership with Adrian evolved into something extraordinary. Together, they created a series of workshops called Math for Everyone, designed to break down barriers and make mathematics accessible to people of all ages and backgrounds. These sessions weren't like traditional classes. They were lively, interactive experiences filled with laughter, storytelling, and hands-on activities. Eleanor brought her unique perspective to every lesson, using everyday objects, like fruit, flowers, or even knitting needles, to illustrate complex concepts. Her goal was simple: to show that math wasn't something to fear but something to embrace, a language that could help us understand the world around us. One of their most memorable workshops took place in a bustling city park. Hundreds of families gathered under colorful tents, eager to participate in what had been advertised as a math carnival. There were booths where children built geometric shapes out of straws and tape, puzzles that challenged adults to think creatively, and even a scavenger hunt that required participants to solve equations to find hidden treasures. At the center of it all stood Eleanor, her silver hair catching the sunlight as she moved from group to group, offering guidance and encouragement. "Look at this," a young boy exclaimed, holding up a lopsided pyramid he had constructed. His face glowed with pride, despite the wobbly structure threatening to collapse. "It's wonderful," Eleanor replied warmly, crouching down to his level. "Do you see how the angles connect? That's geometry in action." The boy beamed, clearly delighted by her praise. Moments like these reminded Eleanor why she had chosen to step back into the spotlight. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about sparking joy and curiosity in others, helping them discover the magic hidden within numbers and shapes. Adrian watched from a distance, marveling at how effortlessly Eleanor connected with people. He had always considered himself a good teacher, but seeing her in action made him realize how much further he still had to go. She didn't just teach math, she taught confidence, patience, and the importance of looking at problems from different angles. Inspired by her example, Adrian began incorporating more of her methods into his own teaching, encouraging his students to experiment and explore, rather than simply memorize formulas. Their efforts didn't go unnoticed. Local schools invited them to revamp their curriculums, integrating playful, real-world applications into lessons. Universities reached out, asking Eleanor to deliver keynote speeches at conferences. Even corporations sought her advice on fostering innovation and creative problem-solving among employees. Despite the growing demand for her time, Eleanor remained selective, choosing only those opportunities that aligned with her values. She refused to let herself become overwhelmed, prioritizing balance and staying true to the life she loved. But perhaps the most meaningful aspect of Eleanor's journey was the relationship she built along the way. Strangers became friends, and acquaintances turned into lifelong supporters. Letters and emails poured in daily, each one expressing gratitude for the impact she had made. A retired factory worker wrote to say that her workshops had inspired him to take up woodworking, applying mathematical principles to create intricate designs. A single mother shared how her daughter, once intimidated by math, now eagerly looked forward to solving problems thanks to Eleanor's videos. These stories filled Eleanor with a deep sense of fulfillment, reminding her that even the smallest actions can have profound consequences. As her reputation grew, so did the invitations to share her wisdom on larger stages. One particularly memorable event took place at a national education summit, where Eleanor delivered a speech titled "The Beauty of Numbers." Standing before an audience of educators, policymakers, and innovators, she spoke not just about mathematics, but about the power of perseverance and self-belief. "When I was younger," she began, her voice steady and warm, "I dreamed of becoming a mathematician. But life had other plans for me. I got married, raised children, and focused on building a home. For many years, I thought I had left my dreams behind. Yet, deep down, I never stopped loving math. It stayed with me, quietly whispering its secrets whenever I paused long enough to listen." She paused, scanning the room. The crowd sat in rapt attention, hanging on her every word. "What I've learned," she continued, "is that our passions don't disappear. They wait. They wait for us to rediscover them, to give them space to grow again. And when we do, they remind us of who we truly are." Her words resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Afterward, dozens of attendees lined up to speak with her, sharing their own stories and seeking advice. For many, Eleanor represented not just a teacher, but a symbol of possibility, a reminder that no matter where we are in life, there is always room to grow. Back home, Eleanor's garden flourished alongside her newfound purpose. She often joked that tending to plants was similar to teaching math. Both required patience, care, and faith in the process. Neighbors would stop by to chat, bringing fresh produce or homemade treats as tokens of appreciation. Some even joined her in organizing informal study groups, turning her backyard into a vibrant hub of learning and connection. Despite her success, Eleanor never lost sight of what mattered most: her community, her family, and her love for simplicity. She declined lucrative offers to write textbooks or host television shows, preferring instead to focus on grassroots initiatives that directly impacted people's lives. To her, the true measure of success wasn't fame or wealth. It was the smiles on children's faces, the light bulb moments when someone finally understood a concept, and the friendships forged through shared experiences. Adrian, meanwhile, continued to grow under Eleanor's mentorship. He published articles highlighting her unconventional methods, co-authored papers exploring innovative approaches to education, and advocated for policies that promoted inclusivity in STEM fields. Though he still occasionally struggled with his ego, he learned to channel his ambition into something greater than himself. In Eleanor, he found not just a collaborator, but a role model, a person whose kindness and wisdom guided him toward becoming the best version of himself. By the time Eleanor reached her 90s, her legacy was undeniable. Schools across the country implemented programs inspired by her teachings, and countless individuals credited her with reigniting their love for learning. Yet, despite the accolades and achievements, she remained humble, quick to deflect praise onto others. "It's not about me," she would say with a gentle smile. "It's about what we can accomplish together." Her final wish reflected this spirit of generosity and inclusion. Knowing her time was limited, Eleanor requested that her notebooks, journals, and recordings be preserved and shared publicly. "Let them inspire someone else," she told Adrian during one of their last conversations. "That's all I ever wanted, to plant seeds that might grow into something beautiful." When Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 92, tributes poured in from around the world. News outlets honored her as a trailblazer, educators celebrated her contributions to the field, and ordinary people shared heartfelt messages about the ways she had touched their lives. Her funeral was a testament to the love and admiration she had inspired, a gathering of friends, family, colleagues, and strangers united by their gratitude for a woman who had changed their world. Though Eleanor was gone, her presence lingered. Her notebooks, now digitized and available online, reached audiences far beyond what she could have imagined. Teachers used her materials to create engaging lessons. Parents referenced her methods to help their children with homework, and aspiring mathematicians studied her work for inspiration. Her garden, lovingly maintained by neighbors, became a sanctuary where people gathered to reflect, learn, and dream. In the end, Eleanor Harper's story was more than just a tale of rediscovered brilliance. It was a reminder that greatness isn't defined by titles or achievements but by the connections we forge and the lives we touch. She had proven that intelligence knows no bounds, that passion can endure a lifetime, and that even the quietest voices can spark revolutions. And as her legacy continued to unfold, one thing became clear. Eleanor hadn't just solved equations, she had rewritten the formula for what it means to live a meaningful life. Eleanor Harper's passing left a void in the hearts of those who had come to know and love her, but her legacy lived on in ways that continued to inspire and transform lives. Her final wish, to have her notebooks, journals, and recordings preserved and shared publicly, became a cornerstone of her enduring impact. What started as a simple request turned into a monumental effort to ensure that her wisdom reached as many people as possible. The project, aptly named Eleanor's Legacy, was spearheaded by Adrian and a team of volunteers who understood the significance of her work. Together, they meticulously digitized her handwritten notes, transcribed her recorded lessons, and curated an online archive accessible to anyone with an internet connection. The response to Eleanor's Legacy was overwhelming. Within weeks of its launch, the website attracted visitors from all corners of the globe. Teachers downloaded her materials to enhance their lesson plans. Parents used her methods to help their children grasp difficult concepts, and students studied her problem-solving techniques to prepare for exams. But beyond the practical applications, Eleanor's work resonated on a deeper level. Her approach to mathematics wasn't just about numbers, it was about seeing the beauty in patterns, embracing curiosity, and trusting one's instincts. For many, her teachings became a source of comfort and encouragement, a reminder that intelligence isn't confined to classrooms or textbooks. One particularly moving story came from a young woman named Maya, who stumbled upon Eleanor's archive during a low point in her life. Maya had always struggled with math, viewing it as an insurmountable obstacle standing between her and her dream of becoming an engineer. Frustrated and disheartened, she considered giving up until she discovered Eleanor's videos. Watching, the elderly mathematician explained complex equations with such warmth and clarity, reignited Maya's determination. She began practicing daily, using Eleanor's strategies to build her confidence. Years later, Maya graduated at the top of her engineering class, dedicating her thesis to the woman who had shown her that perseverance could overcome any challenge. Stories like Maya's were not uncommon. Across continents and cultures, people found solace and inspiration in Eleanor's words. A retired accountant in Japan credited her with rekindling his passion for puzzles and logic games. A farmer in Kenya adapted her geometric principles to design more efficient irrigation systems for his crops. Even artists and writers drew inspiration from her philosophy, applying her emphasis on patterns and connections to their creative pursuits. Eleanor's influence transcended disciplines, proving that her lessons were universal. Back in her hometown, the community rallied to honor her memory in meaningful ways. The local library, where Eleanor had spent countless hours volunteering, renamed its reading room the Eleanor Harper Learning Center. It became a space dedicated to fostering curiosity and lifelong learning, hosting workshops, book clubs, and educational events for people of all ages. Every year on the anniversary of her passing, the town held a celebration called Eleanor Day, featuring lectures, art exhibits, and gardening activities inspired by her passions. Children planted flowers in her honor, while adults shared stories of how she had touched their lives. The event wasn't just a tribute, it was a testament to the lasting bonds she had created. Adrian remained deeply involved in preserving and promoting Eleanor's legacy. He traveled extensively, giving talks at universities, conferences, and schools about the transformative power of inclusive education. His presentations often included anecdotes from his time working with Eleanor, highlighting her humility, creativity, and unwavering belief in the potential of every individual. Though he missed her dearly, Adrian found comfort in knowing that her spirit lived on through the work they had done together. He often said, "Eleanor didn't just teach me math, she taught me how to be a better human being." In addition to his speaking engagements, Adrian collaborated with educators and researchers to develop programs based on Eleanor's methods. These initiatives focused on making STEM fields more accessible to underrepresented groups, including women, minorities, and individuals from low-income backgrounds. One program called Math Without Limits provided free resources and mentorship to students who lacked access to quality education. Another initiative, Everyday Math, partnered with local businesses to demonstrate how mathematical thinking could solve real-world problems. Both programs reflected Eleanor's belief that math should be a tool for empowerment, not exclusion. As the years passed, Eleanor's story continued to resonate with new generations. Schools incorporated her teachings into their curriculums, museums featured exhibits about her life and work, and authors wrote books celebrating her contributions to education and society. Yet, despite the widespread recognition, those who knew her best remembered her not for her achievements but for her kindness and authenticity. To them, she was simply Eleanor, a gardener, a reader, a neighbor, and a friend who happened to love numbers. Her garden, lovingly maintained by the townsfolk, became a symbol of her enduring presence. Visitors from near and far came to walk among the flowers, sit on the bench beneath the old oak tree, and reflect on the lessons she had imparted. Some left notes of gratitude tucked into the pages of books placed on a small shelf nearby. Others brought seeds or cuttings to add to the ever-growing tapestry of greenery. The garden evolved into a living memorial, a place where people could connect with Eleanor's spirit and draw inspiration from her example. On quiet afternoons, Adrian would visit the garden to sit and think. He often imagined Eleanor sitting beside him, offering gentle advice or sharing one of her signature chuckles. Though he missed her companionship, he took solace in knowing that her legacy would continue to grow, touching lives in ways neither of them could have anticipated. In his darkest moments, when self-doubt crept in, he reminded himself of her favorite saying, "We don't need to see the whole staircase to take the first step." Eleanor's story ultimately became a beacon of hope, a reminder that brilliance can emerge from unexpected places and that our greatest gifts often lie dormant, waiting for the right moment to shine. She had proven that age, circumstance, and societal expectations are no match for passion and perseverance. Her journey inspired countless individuals to embrace their talents, pursue their dreams, and make a difference in the world. And so, Eleanor, Harper's legacy endured, not as a static monument frozen in time, but as a dynamic force that continued to evolve and inspire. Through her teachings, her values, and the countless lives she had touched, she remained a guiding light for future generations. Her story served as a powerful reminder that true greatness isn't measured by accolades or achievements, but by the ripples we create in the lives of others. And in those ripples, Eleanor's voice continues to echo, a quiet yet profound whisper urging us all to trust ourselves, embrace curiosity, and never stop learning.